So whilst Barcelona are celebrating, Dermot, how is this being viewed across Spain?
Yeah, well, most people accept that Barca were the best team in La Liga, or especially that they were the most consistent team. That, as the guys were saying, that they won a lot of games 1-0. They didn't have as many kind of ups and downs as Atletico and especially Real Madrid had during the season. So nobody kind of says they didn't deserve to win it. There are still doubts about whether they are like the best team, especially in Real Madrid. They point to the Copa del Rey when Madrid went to the Camp Nou and won pretty well there. And Madrid are still in the Champions League, whereas Barca were knocked out a long time ago. So Madrid kind of still feel that, you know, when everybody's really up for it on a big occasion, that Madrid are better than Barca, but they accept that Madrid took their eye off the ball maybe around the World Cup and earlier on in the season, and that Barca have gone on to win it. There's also the kind of how Barca managed to do it, where it was activating the levers last year to get all the money to bring in Lewandowski, who scored the 2 goals at the weekend, and other players for the team. And then there's the Negreira referee stuff that everybody's still kind of wondering what's going to happen with that, and that's left a bit of a taste, even though nobody is saying like Barca paid Negreira in the past, therefore they got results or they got decisions that went their way this season, but it's still a kind of cloud that's hung over the club. So again, on the pitch, Barca have been the most consistent team, but there's still kind of questions about whether they are really a memorable champion.
Right. So would you say, Dermot, there's skepticism about them?
For sure. And I think there's also skepticism around Barca as well. There's some, like, if you talk to people within the kind of entorno, or like agents and people around the players and executives and things like that, that they accept that this isn't it's a long way off the all-conquering Barca teams of the past, when you had like Messi up front, obviously, where you also had like Neymar and Xavi and Iniesta and all these great players. This is not... Barca have said a few times over the last couple of years that Barca are back is kind of like a recurring catchphrase that they do, that they were at again at the weekend. But they're back in that they have won La Liga, but they're not back to the level that they were at 5-6 years ago, and they're a long way off that still.
Are they? Do you think they're an attractive club to join at the moment, Paul? If we're looking ahead to the future and what they need to do, and the finances, and who's in charge of their transfer process as well, being back in the Champions League, who are they attractive?
I think they sort of are. You just have to see Ilkay Gundogan, that hasn't still signed a contract extension at Man City, and Barcelona is still there. I think that, and that was really interesting what Dermot was saying here about the Negreira case and the clouds that are looming over Barcelona despite all this success on the pitch. But if you speak to players or to people close to players, nowadays they don't try to listen too much to all the noise like on the background of the club like Barcelona. They isolate from that. And I think that football players, they basically see Barcelona as like an easy path to Champions League. They're going to be in the Champions League football every season almost. You're going to compete for the domestic titles, and you're going to have a club which is really, really big, and in a city that is really attractive to live in, basically. And that's why a lot of big players would happily join Barcelona. But at the same time, I agree with Dermot that like the feelings that we got on that parade and the quotes from the president or with Xavi saying that the club is back is far away from what the inputs that we see from the club. We don't have to look too back to see how the sport director announced that he's leaving for Aston Villa, that he believes that Aston Villa, and no disrespect to that, because of course Aston Villa is a great club, but he feels that Aston Villa is a better project for him than Barcelona. So that tells you a lot about the situation of the club. There's the other a sporting director, which is Jordi Cruyff, whose future is uncertain too. He's likely to leave, maybe. He's considering his chances to leave. So that tells a lot about like the two guys that were entitled to keep working on that rebuild of the club. They are considering leaving. One is going to leave, certainly. The other is considering it. And that's the feeling, and that's a cloud, as we were saying before, that is present like in agents, in players, and in everyone that is inside this football club.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting on that. I agree with that, and I also been talking to some people that who know players who Barca are thinking about signing, and the players themselves, they still just see, they're just not interested in all the off-pitch stuff. They just see it's Barcelona. As they were growing up, you know, Barcelona were a champion team. They get to go and play in the Camp Nou, even though they won't be playing in the Camp next year. It's still kind of, it's an insight into how players see the world. I suppose they maybe are, I don't know how many professional players are going to be listening to this podcast, for example, because they have a more kind of black and white or a simpler way of looking at it, I guess. And Barca are still super attractive, as are Real Madrid. And I'd say more than Villa, maybe an executive who can look at the numbers and look forward might go, oh, Villa have a better chance maybe over the next while. Players aren't going to choose Villa over Barca. Or, you know, a lot of players last summer turned down Chelsea or Spurs or Lewandowski, you know, huge player, ended up going to Barcelona. And if Barca can find money this summer, which I guess something we get onto, but is a big question, like big players, whether it's Gundogan or other players, will be attracted to go there.
Yeah, but isn't the point there, and I completely take your point, that the off-field stuff players are not really going to pay any attention to. We can put on that kit, we can play for Barcelona, they're the La Liga champions in the Champions League, playing for Xavi, absolutely great. The one off-field thing that maybe someone within a footballer's camp might pay attention to is whether contracts actually get signed and who will get paid and where the knock-on effect might be. Now that surely has to be discussed within football. The rest of it, I take your point, but actually whether you join them and are able to sign a contract is a completely different thing, isn't it?
It should be, for sure. And those contracts that Barca signed last year, like Lewandowski, for example, that, you know, he's on a huge amount of money next season as well, and the following season. And as it stands, the club basically just can't afford to keep paying those contracts, because last summer they had all the levers, activated all those financial levers that we talked about, raised like 862 million euros or something like that. They can't do that again this year. So they need to find ways to fill the holes in their accounts. Last summer was kind of a short-term fix to kind of push all the problems down the road and to hope that in the future that things will become better. It did kind of work in a way that it provided this boost of enthusiasm, boost of goals as well from Lewandowski, good defenders that they signed, which kind of pushed them forward to win the league. But they need to, their plan is to build on that again, or that will somehow kind of catapult them forward. But that's, remains to be seen, I guess, is what we have to say.
There is an element here as well that it was a thing in the last transfer window in summer, and it's going to be a thing as well in the next summer, which is like some players that joined Barcelona had a clause that if they weren't able to be registered on time to play in La Liga, they could leave for free. It happened to Andreas Christensen, it happened to Jules Koundé, it happens to Franck Kessié. All of those players made sure on a clause on the contract that they signed to join Barcelona, that if they weren't registered on time, they could leave. And that's something that is going to happen with Gundogan or Íñigo Martínez or whoever that Barcelona is going to be able to sign. So that's probably a show of the concern that is among footballers, but it's something that I'd say that it's more like taking care of agents. And as long as the agents and the people that the footballers have confidence in manage it well, and they see it like an appropriate way for the players to go, I don't think that most of the players would ask themselves like many questions.
So when you talk about, Paul, the sporting director Almani going to Aston Villa, I wonder whether actually it's slightly more correct to say it's a simpler project rather than a better project. Maybe that's how he views it.
No, I don't think so. I think that it's a project where he will be able to work as a sporting director. And in Barcelona, sometimes you are more like patching up holes or just like looking for short-term fixes. One of the reasons that made Mateu Alemany think that he didn't have everything that he wanted to work here was the fact that Barcelona was considering bringing back Messi. Mateu Alemany was obsessed with the prospect of like rejuvenating this squad. Bringing back Lionel Messi doesn't fit that prospect. And I'm not saying this was the reason why he decided to leave, but it's just a lot of things that just pile up, and that was one of them. So just to paint the picture of what was under his eyes to work for FC Barcelona, and the differences that he's going to find out in Aston Villa, where he's going to be able just to plan with stable numbers, to try to sign players, try to make profit with sales, which is apparently what should be his job.